Hello and good afternoon, everyone. This is Naishad Gadani coming to you from a very drizzly Melbourne afternoon, and we are still in lockdown. As we were coming on the show, I was talking to Leah, and we had Leah last year when I was in quarantine. In May of 2020, and we are speaking almost after a year. And I wish that we don't we when we speak next time we are not in lockdown, because it's based for everyone else too. But welcome to the show. For those who are seeing us for the first time, where we've been doing this for a long time. This is a 208th show, episode in our career care package journey, and we consider that we are the longest running LinkedIn live show ever. Although LinkedIn hasn't acknowledged it, but we are just making this up to make sure that our imposter syndrome don't catch up on us. But it's great to be to be back on every Friday at 12 p.m. to talk about careers. And on today's show, we are talking to Leah. She's the founder of Relaunch Me. She's also got her own podcast too. Please check that out. And we are going to talk about getting career confidence after a career break. But before we start to talk to Leah, let's welcome Caroline Brown.
Thanks, Nation. I'm looking out the window. It's actually sunny here for about 5 minutes. So beautiful Melbourne weather. So I'll enjoy that for the 5 minutes that it lasts. Leah, it's absolutely fantastic to have you here. And when you suggested the topic of confidence after a career break, it is so timely, because I think jobs are actually picking up, maybe not in Victoria at the immediate moment, but how terrible would it be not to go and be the fullest and most fantastic version of you for lack of confidence? And I was just reflecting that, looking for a job is confidence shattering a lot of the time, because you do get ghosted. But when you're coming after a break, whether it's parental leave or because of the pandemic, or, even coming to a new country, it's even worse, because you've got to really keep reminding yourself of what you can offer and what that break has given you in terms of confidence. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be back.
Yeah, it's fantastic to have you back. So I'm going to kick off and just say, I guess, maybe just give people a brief introduction to what Relaunched Me, the career, your business is about, because, you're doing some amazing things with clients.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Well, look, I started this business in 2014, so about 7 years ago. And I think, as the name suggests, it was my first, idea was to help women particularly relaunch their careers after a career break. So most of the clients that we worked with in those early days were, a lot of women who had been on parental leave, some men as well. And it was really that I realised that a lot of them had lost that confidence being out of the workforce, some 5, 10, even 15, 20 years, and just really not knowing where to start. But as the business has evolved, we are now working with lots of men as well, and people at all stages of their career, from year 10 right through to people nearing retirement. So I think that's what I love about what we do. It's very diverse. It's career coaching, job search coaching, the resume, LinkedIn writing, and a lot of interview coaching as well. So it's nice to have that variety.
Yeah, absolutely. So the confidence, how do you know, confidence can be a tricky thing, because you can attribute it to something other than what it is. So what do you think are signs that, people need a confidence boost, or people are lacking in confidence? How does that play out when people are looking for jobs?
Yeah, look, I think it plays out in a lot of ways. I would say the first thing is a lack of clarity. One of the first things I think when people are lacking confidence is they don't know what sort of jobs they should be targeting. And usually the reason for that is that they've really lost a sense of who they are. For some people, perhaps they never really understood themselves in the first place. But I think when people have been out of the workforce, they forget what skills they have, they forget what's important to them, what their strengths are, what their values are. So if you don't understand yourself, it's really hard to work out what sort of jobs you're best suited to. So I think, that's probably one of the first things. One of the other ways it plays out is seeing people who are applying for jobs where they're perhaps well overqualified. And that's because, again, they've lost that self-worth and they don't feel that they can offer as much. But when you're applying for jobs that you're overqualified for, it has the same problem as applying for jobs that you're underqualified for, that they start to get rejections for jobs that are well beneath them. And, it's usually because they think that they are overqualified and that they will get bored. But obviously, again, that rejection makes them start to even lose more confidence.
That's an interesting point. I hadn't, thought of it like that. And maybe it's a difference between men and women as well, because they say men will, if they've got 50%, say, of the requirements for a job, they'll apply, but women need to think that have to have 90% of requirements to actually apply. So I hadn't thought about, applying for jobs that you're well overqualified for as a sign of, missing confidence. But yeah, that's a really good point.
Also, I guess the way they present, that negative self-talk, using words like but or just or only, I'm only a stay-at-home mum. I've just had this experience, this little bit, like they really talk themselves down. In a work setting and in an interview environment, you have to sell yourself. So if you are using those negative words and that negative language, that's not going to help you sell yourself. So I think it's that negative self-talk. It's comparing themselves to others, the imposter syndrome, and feeling like they're not good enough to do a certain job. And even how they present, body language, appearance, often those things, I guess, particularly for us poor Victorians who've lived in our activewear for the last 12 months, I think a lot of us have, we've forgotten how to present ourselves in a business sense. And, we've sort of possibly grown out of our clothes or don't feel as comfortable in clothes that we used to because we've got used to wearing casual clothes all the time. So even a little makeover and getting a stylist to just help you find a couple of outfits, not necessarily expensive designer clothes, but just a couple of outfits that make you feel really good about yourself and that you can, just even something like that can really build confidence in the job search process.
It's interesting because I think I was listening to somebody talk the other day, and I know that it's a, sort of one of those things around neuroscience, but the brain doesn't distinguish between thought and action a lot of the time. So that thing about putting on your work suit or getting the haircut or acting like you're employed can help with that, just sort of manifesting that actual reality for yourself as well, that confident reality. So yeah, what are other tips do you think that would work for people that you've seen that work with your clients
that are lacking confidence, people who are lacking confidence? Yeah, so look, I guess there's a number of reasons why people lack confidence. So I guess one of those things is a lack of feeling like they don't have the skills. Particularly if you've been out of the workforce, often things have changed over time, particularly if you've been in roles in marketing or something that's a digital focus. Those digital skills, I think if you don't have some of those, you feel like you've been really left behind. So I guess one of the things I would say is look for opportunities if you're not working, where you can start to develop some of those digital or STEM skills that might help you be more marketable. As you probably know, there's some great, what we call MOOCs, which are massive open online courses. So online learning platforms like Udemy, Coursera, Class Central, Allison.com, there's a huge range, some for more creative people as well, where you can learn digital marketing skills, data analysis skills. There's so many project management skills. There's so many different courses that I think that will build confidence, knowing that you're learning something new that you can put on your CV, and also something that you can talk about, something that you've been doing whilst you've been unemployed or looking for work. So I think, updating your skills is one of the first things. Secondly, I think getting out there and talking to people who are your supporters. People that you've perhaps had really good working relationships with in the past, people, ex-old bosses, old colleagues who still remember you for how you were when you worked with them all those years ago. So I think sometimes even just getting out and talking to people that you've worked with in the past and seeing that you are still valued and still remembered for the things that you do well can be a bit of a confidence boost as well.
Fantastic.
Yeah, just wanted to welcome Vipul. Great work, guys. Thank you, Vipul. And Malita says that all very well said, Leah. Confidence is such an issue for people returning to work, and fully agree with you. It's not just about people returning to work after a maternity break, to somebody who was looking at their sick family member or anything else. But I think it's a massive challenge. One of the things that I read in a book, Design Your Work Life, and it says that the Stanford School of Design has three words written on it, which is says you are here, and which just says that you are here and it's fine that you are here. There's nothing wrong with you that you are here. And this reinforcement of that, it is fine for you to take a break. It is fine that you had a very diverse, very unique work history. It is absolutely fine. I think that reinforcement is very, very necessary in my view. Because any change or any transition that anybody goes through is first is the acceptance of that I'm here and there's nothing wrong with me. Until individuals who are dealing with it, until they really kind of agree with it, or they find it's okay where they are, I think then the next steps are becomes a little bit more clearer. May not be easy still, but a little bit more clearer that I'm okay where I am. What would you kind of advise people to really embrace that it's okay that you know you, you just took a break, it's fine.
Yeah, look, I think if there's any positives that have come out of this COVID-19 situation is that the career break is not going to be such a big deal anymore. There are going to be so many more people with a career break than there ever has been, that I don't think that people will see it as a hurdle. And look, I think, when you talk about your career break on your CV, you don't have to go into that much detail. If you present I always like to see your employment history in, I guess, like a table type format where you can see the flow of history. I would always recommend just putting like a one-liner in as a career break, maybe brackets travel or maternity leave or due to restructure. I don't think you have to go into a lot of detail in your resume about what you've done during that time. In the cover letter, I guess that is the place where you might explain your motivations for the career break or your motivations to return from the career break. But look, I think that career break is going to be much more widely accepted going forward. And I think people will also see that there are benefits from a career break if you use it to upskill, to volunteer, to learn new things, and to really go through that self-assessment to work out what you really want to do in the future. There's certainly nothing wrong with that.
I do get a sense now that people, in general, that they are appreciative of the lived experience as well. Like there's been a few people that I know that have applied for jobs where, and it is a sector of the marketplace, so it's been in counselling and career development, but they wanted to know somebody's lived experience that was similar to the client base that they're working with. And I think there is a lot of stuff around just, what you were doing during that time that is lived experience that you could think about how that actually really positions you as well. And I also think that, we as individuals get hung up on a career break, but quite often employers want to know like the value that you've delivered in previous roles as well. You know what I mean? So there's no sort of hiding that you've had a break. It's more, I've had a break, but that's just one part of my, like you viewing it along the career continuum as well. So because I think a lot of people get really, and maybe it's about that reinforcing the confidence again, is going back through, well, what is it that I really loved doing when I had full-time employment, and where's the value, what value did I contribute with that as well? And I do think that like when I've worked on resumes, I've had that success where you've really highlighted that, the richness of somebody's history, I think. So, yeah.
That's right. I think, when you present yourself to employers, like if you are applying for jobs on Seek, I guess the issue is if you have had an extended career break. So I'm talking, 5, 10, 15 years, even more. I guess the issue is when you are in a competitive recruitment process, recruiters are paid to find the closest match candidate. So as a recruiter, I'm an ex-recruiter, you're unlikely to put someone in the short list of your top 3 or 4 candidates who hasn't worked for 10 or 15 years. That's just the way it is. And unfortunately, the traditional job search method of going onto job boards and applying for jobs just doesn't work for someone who has had a career break of that type of length. So what's important is that they approach their job search strategy in a completely different way. And my sort of favorite mantra when I talk to my clients is look for people, not jobs. So, going back to someone that you've worked with, people that you've, in your personal network, and talking to them about what you're looking for. And, this is the type of job I'm interested. Can you keep an eye out for me? Can you let me know if you hear of anything? Someone who is what I call a relauncher, who has had a long break, it's probably going to be much easier for them to find a job using that method than applying on Seek when they're competing against people who are doing that same job down the road at a competitor.
Absolutely.
But look, the good news is that confidence can be rebuilt. And I think it can be baby steps. You don't have to feel like you're jumping off this big cliff. I think just even one little action every day will start to build momentum. And I think, the biggest problem when you don't have confidence is it stops you from taking action, which, as we know, is so important to be proactive and to be taking action in the job search process. So, when I talk about action, it might be sending a message to a stranger on LinkedIn and asking them if you can get 10 minutes of their time to have a chat. It might be calling a recruiter to ask some questions about the job before you put your application in. So if you are really lacking confidence, those phone calls and those emails can be really difficult to make because you're, that pesky little inner voice is saying, oh, they won't reply, you're being a pest, they're too busy. So, this inner diva is telling us to not do these things. So it's, important that we recognize that inner critic and really shut it down and start to just really slowly take little actions that will build the momentum over time and, hopefully start to allow you to make some inroads.
You about to say something, Nish?
No, I just, we got a comment around, Caroline, such a great point. I agree. People get, hang up on that. Going back to this networking aspect, I think obviously my view is that a lot of people have become very sympathetic to the needs of job seekers out there. I think there's a sense of kindness when you approach people, because people starting to understand, like what Caroline said, and I think it was from an article last year, it was written, the collective grief that we are all feeling all across the world around COVID and its impacts. So I think everyone feels that it's okay if, if somebody has reached out to me, I'm kind of happy to assist someone, provided that request is done in a professional sense, rather than, hey, because I'm looking for work, you got to help me out, right? What are your thoughts on kind of drafting that communication so that you don't, obviously in it there is obviously a frustration kind of under the surface that you're feeling that I need to get this right and this is the right person, but you still don't want to burn that too, right? So there's always a balance that you want to keep. What are your kind of suggestions, specifically people who are relaunching themselves? How the communication, what are some of the tips that you have to talk to those decision makers?
Good question. I guess the first thing is any opportunity to go through a mutual connection is always going to be really helpful. So again, using LinkedIn to identify someone that you want to talk to and saying, I guess, if there are some mutual connections who could introduce you, or even contacting that mutual connection and saying, look, I notice you're connected to this person. Can I use your name and just mention that I know you when I make the introduction email or the call? So I think, looking for a mutual connection would be my first piece of advice. Second is always ask for someone's advice or for their help, not saying that you're looking for a job. People, as you mentioned, Nash, and I think even before COVID, people really love to help, and they love to talk about themselves, and they love to talk about their jobs. So I think if you don't ask, you won't get. So the worst thing that can happen is that they say no, or they say they're too busy, or they ignore your message. At the end of the day, you just move on to the next person. So if you don't ask, you don't get. So I think it's always worth asking for someone if they are willing to give you a little bit of their time. And I guess the third thing is be mindful of their time. I have one client who said, I'm just not getting anywhere. I'm reaching out to people and I'm doing everything, but everyone's saying no, or they're not responding. And then when I dug a little bit deeper, I realized she was actually asking everyone out for lunch. So, people, this is pre-COVID, but people are really busy and they don't have time to even have lunch with their closest friends, let alone lunch with a total stranger. So we wound that back a little bit, and I suggested, look, how about you ask them if they have 10 minutes to have a chat to you over the phone? That could lead to a Zoom call, that could lead to a coffee, it could lead to lunch, but you've got to, start slowly and really be mindful of people's time, and, just ask for a little bit of help to start with.
That's a funny story, isn't it? I love the analogy. It's like asking someone to marry you on the first date. But it is interesting because I think, the mistakes people make is putting way too much in that first email, for example. And, even the succinctness of that means that you're respectful of people's time. And I think also, like, in a way, I'm really interested in your thoughts on this. Zoom's made it so much easier to do these meetings because, you can talk to somebody interstate where you couldn't, meet them for a coffee before now. It's kind of opened up a whole raft of opportunities, I think.
Most definitely. And isn't it strange that we wouldn't have even thought of organising an information interview over Zoom until this happened? I find that quite bizarre that we just thought we had to always meet people in person.
It's funny. And one of my clients last year, she said, we had a 3-week break in Melbourne where we could do coffee, and I did 10 of them. So
really she made it.
But so just not Zoom. I think WhatsApp also, just to interrupt, WhatsApp is also pretty good because you can straight away call, no schedule appointments and everything else, and you can use it. And I think it is becoming norm now, not particularly extraordinary things that you used to do before. But I think that significantly helps. Now you got on LinkedIn itself, you can schedule your Zoom appointments. So I think that's an added advantage now. People have got that account link, so you can immediately send, and that's all done. So I think there are some unique and I guess that people are okay if you said 15-minute Zoom call, people will understand that immediately. Sorry, Leah, you wanted to say something.
Oh, no. I mean, I just, going back to what we were saying, I just think we're sort of conditioned, even as children, not to ask and not to pester people and not to, annoy people and take up their time. So I think a lot of people, it's like you've got to build this muscle up again of learning to ask for things and realizing that if you do ask for things, then often it will lead to opportunities. Often those information interviews might lead to another introduction. It might lead to a bit of contracting, consulting work. You might be able to ask that person whether they'd be willing to give you some overflow work if they need some help on a project. Like, you just don't know where that conversation's going to go. And I think we can't just assume that they're going to find us a pest and be annoyed by us asking for something.
Absolutely. What are your thoughts around I think I'm my internet connection's really bad. But what are your thoughts around, finding a tribe of people, like in terms of, say, rebuilding your confidence after you've had a break, of finding a group of people doing the same thing? Have you seen any sort of greater success of people finding people doing the same thing as them in terms of looking for a job and rebuilding their confidence?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Look, I think having a bit of a cheerleaders community around you who are going through the same thing is definitely helpful. Often I say to clients, perhaps try and there's Facebook groups where there's some coaching, that's group coaching, if that's sort of what you're into, or even just finding someone else who's going through a similar experience, someone else who's unemployed. Might be your accountability buddy that you say, like, let's work together on our resume, or let's work together on our LinkedIn. Let's share information that we're learning about the process, or updating our documents. So having someone, I guess, who you can be accountable to, and I guess having someone to support you and motivate you through that process, and also remind you of the things that you are really good at, I think is really important. Sometimes, particularly if you've had a long career break, you really lose touch with what your skills are and what you're good at. And so I guess that's where career assessments, strengths assessments can be a really good confidence boost, being able to actually give a name to your strength, to actually articulate it, and to be able to explain it in a business language. I think often we sort of kind of know what we're good at, but we're not able to explain it in the right way. So some of those tools.
That normalization of the experience as well. You can feel like that lack of confidence means that you're a failure. It's because you're not feeling confident. But when you know that lots of other people feel that same way, you go, oh, well, that's normal then. I'm in the realms of a normal reaction to, a gap or a situation too.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that's really important is trying to keep to a routine, particularly if you've been working for a long time and you've lost your job because of COVID. Like, trying to have some sort of routine to your day is important, and also looking for opportunities to do things outside of work that will energize you. So, could be, obviously with COVID, we might be a bit restricted. It might be for me, it's running. That's my secret weapon. I run and run and run. And
here comes Leah.
Yeah, that's my stress relief, but it also builds my confidence. Like, I can, run an extra couple of kilometers each week. You start to, I know it builds my confidence. So it could be for someone, a craft act. I met a client the other day, does scrapbooking, and she builds these beautiful scrapbooks for her kids every year for their birthday. And she absolutely loves it. She gets great feedback from family and friends. It makes her feel really good. So looking for activities that energize us and make us feel good is really important when you're going through this job search process, to keep those energy levels up.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think going back to what you just said, doing the assessment, I think strength is a very good assessment, because it does not really look at your technical competencies. It just sees you as a person as whole. And strength assessments are particularly people who are unsure, even though they want to relearn, they are not sure where do I really fit in. I think that gives them a real kind of insight into what are they really good at. Sometimes we don't know that what we know as well. We don't know that in fact, I was talking to my wife yesterday, and I said, you know what, I just did not know that I would enjoy cooking. I just did not know that before. I always thought that I'm really bad at it, right? Until I really started to do that. And it's just something that that I did not know that I really enjoy that too. So I think there's some sort of value to gain out of it. There's also, for people who are listening, look at Via Strength. It's a free tool available. You can actually do that 15-20 minutes, take that survey and give you a sense of where your strengths are. And then start to look at whether the role that you are interested in, whether you can really express that strength or not. That's how you can start to kind of narrow it down. And another one that I can think of is that there is a new, not so much new, but there is a philosophy around congruence in our career. That means who you are. So if you look at a triangle and say one it says who you are, in terms of who you are in person, then the second one is what do you do and what do you value. So until we find a congruence into all of them three, then that becomes kind of sweet spot. That who am I? So I'm an empathetic person. I really like adventure, or I'm really what is it, outgoing extrovert or introvert, whatever. And what do you do? What kind of vocation that you are into, and what do you believe in? Once you kind of get that congruence happening, that's another way to think about too, because we don't think about congruence as much. We think they are probably distinct, and sometimes we arrive at congruence by accident, rather than deliberate act of let me do some research, let me figure that out, isn't it?
Yeah, and I guess if you have the clarity, you are more confident about the jobs that you're applying, like, what you're focusing on with your job search. I think the hardest part is for people who go on to seek and they just don't even know what to look for. They're not sure what industry, what type of role suits them. And so then, that becomes this, just a firing off resumes that aren't tailored for any certain area and just hoping something sticks. And obviously that leads to rejections, which, impacts confidence again. So I think if you have the clarity about exactly what you said, Nash, what you enjoy, what you're naturally good at, what your strengths are and what your interests are, at least then that starts to narrow your job search down a little bit. So you can focus on project management or sales or customer service. It's hard to write a resume to be all things to all people these days because of the keyword optimization. But can I just go back to what you mentioned, Nash, about the strengths coaching? The other real advantage of doing those strengths assessments, that it also thinks about the strengths you can use in your job search. So if your strengths come out as someone who's great at networking, who's great at building rapport and relationships, then straight away, okay, well, my job search strategy needs to be around networking. If your strategy is more around your writing skills, like if you say your strengths are in writing, then perhaps you need to be writing articles and posts on LinkedIn that will attract the attention of recruiters. So the strengths assessment can have lots of different purposes to build confidence in terms of the jobs you're applying for, but also your job search strategy.
That's a fantastic point to make to people, because I think one of the things that people do forget is that you're applying your job search, your career skills into your job search anyway. We tend to look at these things very differently, but I think that's a great way to, describe how to actually use that approach as well. I think also, just going back to what you guys are saying, that you can use that story of your own research into yourself, into conversations that you have with your network. It's like I've done some reflection, I've done some assessments, and what I really identified from this is an affinity with this type of work. Could I ask you a few questions about that? Or even in your cover letter as well, you're not just you're not just randomly applying, that you've actually done some sincere backgrounding of yourself, and that kind of authenticity, as I think, is missing in a lot of ways that people, a lot of stuff that people put in their cover letter. They forget that they're actually a person, a lot of the time talking to a person versus, a machine, basically. So, yeah, there's lots of different ways to use that kind of reflection. So, we've got a question. Vaction has said, can you help us look for a job in Australia? Go and have a look at our Career Care Package YouTube channel, and also check out Leah's podcast. There's so much information there that you can look at that will help you find a job in Australia. It depends on what you're actually looking for help with, but you will find a lot of information there. Balin said, I fully agree that cooking is a great stress buster. Depends who's eating your food, I reckon. So somehow it gives a lot of stress to the lady in the house who has to clean up the mess created. Depends on the household, I think.
That's right. So I must tell you, Balin, that I'm a project manager. So I start and I finish everything. So if I made the mess, then it's my responsibility to clean the mess. I think that's where you got to be a little bit more diligent about it. You can't just make chicken curry and leave everything down there for somebody else to do that. That's not a great project manager. Project managers do the from start to the finish. So that's my tip for you, Balin. But let's continue the conversation. We're running out of time, probably 5-10 minutes more. In terms of interviews, is explaining that, I think, if you put your recruiter hat on, recruiters, in my view, want to pick up the low hanging fruits, somebody who fits the exact criteria, so that they don't have to really push the application through, and they can get their uh, against some other recruiters who are also filling up the role, right? So they are always kind of fighting in putting the best candidate forward, with so that they have least resistance from the employer. When somebody comes with a break, that's like, oh God, I have to now think about how do I position. I like you, but I don't know whether am I willing to take the risk on you or not, because that's like 10% of your annual salary. That's like 10, 15, 20 grand, depending upon the salary. Tell us, how do you really convince a recruiter to help you out here?
Yeah, look, it's a really good question. And I'm an ex-recruiter. I think recruiters get a bad rap because, as you say, they're trying to fill the client brief. So if they continually throw these left field candidates in the shortlist, the client will go somewhere else next time, and they'll lose that client. So I do understand why recruiters do that. And I would say going to a recruiter is not the best avenue for someone who's been out of the workforce for a long period. I'm not talking 12 months, I'm talking 5, 10 years, because recruiters will always find the closest match. So I don't think the Seek job search process or the recruiters is the best avenue. I would go direct where I can, and be approaching people directly through LinkedIn, through their network. I'm not saying that's easy, but that will improve their chances of getting work. But in terms of someone who, say, has been out for a shorter break and has got the experience and the skills that they're looking for, then I think they need to prove to the recruiter that they're current, that the skills that they're looking for are up to date, that they've kept in touch with what's happening in the industry. And obviously LinkedIn is a great way of doing that. They can be following what's happening in LinkedIn. They can be listening to podcasts. They can be a member of certain industry groups on LinkedIn. So I think it's showing that they've still got the skills. They're still current, got up to date with what's happening in the industry. So that I guess there aren't any concerns in terms of them taking a long time to hit the ground running. So I think that would be my advice.
I think you'll also make sure that you really understand the job and make the recruiter's job easy as well. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you've got 5 things that you've got to do, you can give them examples of where you've done those 5 things, and really, so then they're going to be, if they're selling you to their client, they've ticked off, or like anticipate those questions, and they've ticked off those questions as well. So it is such a challenge for people, that 5 to 10 year longer gap. It's almost, people feel like they're starting again in a lot of ways, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the skills are definitely still there. It's just, I think you're out of the way of using them. You're out of the way of talking about them. So exactly right. Being, if you do get an interview, having really specific examples of when you've demonstrated those skills in the past is really important. Understanding the behavioral interviewing technique, which we talked about last year. So it's all of those things that will help someone who's been out of the industry for a little while.
Fantastic.
Excellent. I think Chrissy, our common friend, says great advice, Leah, and we are going to get Chrissy also on our LinkedIn Live as well, very, very soon, Chrissy. And no, thank you again, Leah, for being on our show, sharing generously your expertise, with our audience. Now, how do people reach out to you? What's the best way?
Yeah, look, the best way is just through the website. So it's relaunchme.com.au. There's a contact page which they can complete a little form which will come directly through me or my mobile emails on the website as well. And LinkedIn, I'm very happy to connect with people on LinkedIn. Thank you for having me, guys. You're doing such an amazing job. I can't believe you are so consistent with your episodes. It puts me to shame. So I think, like, I know how hard it is to be consistent with the content, and you show up so regularly. I think you're doing an amazing service to this community, and it's really nice to be a part of it. So thank you.
Well, thank you for thanking us. So it's lovely to have you on this show, and I'm sure we'll have you back on talking on other topics that will help people, because we're at the coalface and you're at the coalface, and I think we take a lot of stuff for granted, but there's so much expertise that you can share just from being out there and helping people every day. So thank you for joining us again.
Thank you so much. It's been great.
All right. So next week, now I have announced this 3 times, and all the 3 times I've been wrong. And that is not my fault at all. I must tell you that KB has been feeding me wrong information about who's coming next week. Now do I just bet my life on this, KB? Next week we
Yes,
do have the optimism man coming in, right? Because there are
that's
3
right.
times. Okay, right. Okay, so we do have Victor Purton coming in next Friday, talking about optimism and the survey that they've recently conducted, which talks about what makes people optimistic. So do tune in next Friday, 12 p.m. Hopefully on next Friday, we will all be out of this dreaded lockdown too. So that would be awesome. Everyone have a great weekend. And I think all the Victorians know, mask up, everyone. All right. We will see you next Friday. Until then, have a great weekend, everyone. Bye for now.
Bye for now.
Bye.